We can do it. Yes, we can. We can change things throughout the land, but we all must lend a hand. We can do it. Oh, yes, we can. Oh, your neighbor over there, a bit bewildered, but he cares.
My name is Linda Weltner. I'm the host of Changing Our World, North Shore Citizens in Action. And tonight we are at Evan Longin's home interviewing Ariela Bairey Ben Ishay from Israel. And the people who are interviewing her are going to be from the Salem Center. Ariela has a doctorate of human development and political psychology. She teaches at Sapir College in Israel. She teaches such things as intergroup relations, leadership for social change, coping with diversity in the workplace, and group facilitation in a multicultural society to which she belongs especially. She is a founding member of a cooperative community called Wahat al Salaam, Neve Shalom, which is a Jewish-Palestinian cooperative. In the U.S., she's now teaching a course at Salem State that is about building partnerships in situations of protracted conflict. So, Ariela, I will leave you to the team that is going to interview you.
I'm Evan Longin. I'm from the Salem Center. I'm going to be on the Reflecting team tonight. And the Reflecting team consists of my associates, Marjorie Roberts, a past associate of ours, William Blaine Wallace, who's now the chaplain at Bates College, and Stephen Gaddis, my colleague, is going to be doing the interviewing tonight. The questions are a very integral part of the collaborative interview. So both the questions and the answers we hope will be attended to tonight. We see this as a process of learning and cooperative learning and collaboration. So Stephen is going to lead the interview. The three of us are then going to reflect on ideas that emerge, and we're going to turn it back.
Ariel, it's lovely to meet you. I really enjoyed our brief connection earlier tonight, and it felt very warm to me, so I'm happy to reconnect and continue our conversation. Neither of us have an idea where this might end up, so can I ask you for a couple questions? If it's okay if I just keep track of some of the things you're saying and take notes while we're talking. It helps me stay close to what you're saying. Also, I don't know what the effects of my questions might be, so if there's any effects that aren't intended that are problematic, would you please let me know, or don't feel any requirement to respond to the questions if it's not your preference.
Well, there's something you need to know too, that I'm not used to being the center of so much attention.
Yes.
Usually I'm in the position of facilitating and listening.
Yes.
So I don't know where it's going to go either.
Yes.
And I'm prepared to be surprised.
Okay. Where we might start as one possibility is just as you think about the opportunity to be at the center of the conversation, if we might talk about some things that are most precious to you, that have been meaningful to you and heartfelt, we could sort of get an understanding of how come, what the history of that is a bit. Something around what has gotten you to be here in the U.S. at this time, or maybe something about your connection with Evan that got you interested in coming here, or something about the work that you're doing.
When Evan came to stay with us in the Wahat al Salaam, Neve Shalom, he came through my connection with Debbie and the project that Debbie was initiating. And in our community, I've been there since 1980, really. It's a long time. I was 25 when I came, and I'm 52 now. And I've seen many people come and go, many projects come and go, many people from all over the world who want to do good things and who have been trying to contribute to building partnership between Palestinians and Jews in our area and outside. And some of them have a lot of great things to do, but they come and go, so that nothing really continues. And some of them think they have something to contribute, but we don't really have much to learn from them. And when Evan and Debbie did the training together with David at the Wahat al Salaam, Neve Shalom, I invited close friends of mine and colleagues and students, people who I could risk it not being so successful with, because I thought, okay, before I invite people I take a big risk on, I'll invite people, colleagues and friends who will be understanding if it's just one more thing.
Okay.
And my daughter had come back from Artsbridge, and she was born and she was raised in the community. So she has been through many activities that strengthen or try to strengthen the partnership, the connection, the capacity to transcend from a situation of conflict to a new way of viewing the relationship between both people. And going through the training and getting to know these people gave me a sense that there was so much to learn, where I felt, I knew everything, or I knew most of what they had to be learned. And when Evan suggested that I come out here to Marblehead to Salem Center to teach a course, I thought, wow, that's a neat idea. I don't travel much because my kids are young still. My son is 15 and my daughter is 17, and I try not to upset myself. But then they said that they would come too. So my daughter will be at Artsbridge as a peer counselor.
Wow.
My son and my husband are traveling with friends in Canada. And this is the first week I've really had without being with family and just teaching.
Wow.
This is the second day.
The second day.
The second day of teaching here.
Yes. And so there's so many things that you said that I find myself curious to know a bit more about. You talked about building partnerships and something about this project of Artsbridge being different than many of the other projects you've experienced before that came and went. Could you say a bit more about what seemed special to you, or what stood out, or what gave you a sense that you had something to learn from it?
Well, I met the people,
Yes.
and I found that our conversations went to new places. I found myself not repeating things that I had said before. I found myself hearing things that were different, and I found myself interested in continuing the relationship, but also where other people came and went, they came and stayed. And they come 3 times a year. And that means that we can be in relationship and we can get to know each other. And also they took a deep interest and understanding with great compassion, by the way, and very little judgment on what it's like to really live together, to look. Living together, when you actually choose it, has many wonderful benefits, because you grow, you develop. But some people, it's like rubbing 2 cuts together all the time. It can be painful and it can be stressful, and as a community we're really holding it for a lot of people. We see us as a source of inspiration, as a source of hope, and sometimes you need people to hold you too.
So you felt a bit held by the people that came through Artsbridge. And so I'm interested in how it sounds like building partnerships and relationship, and it's something that is very precious to you, those words, those ideas. Can you help us understand a little bit more how that developed for you, how caring about building partnership developed for you and what it means to you?
Yeah, when I first came to Israel, of course, I was 17, and I was raised in Mexico, and I lived in Arizona for 2 years. I thought I knew American culture through Arizona, but then I came to England and I realized it was a very different culture. But I came with a lot of idealism, and I came with very little knowledge of partners in the area that we were to be building a long-term relationship with. I came very self-absorbed, and I think like many Jews, I came very filled with my own desire to establish a state and to be part of something pioneering. And at the university, when I was studying agriculture at the Hebrew University, it became clear to me that everything wasn't as rosy as I thought. And the more I became friends with the other Palestinians at the campus, and I became more involved, my consciousness began to be more raised. And I realized that my mother usually says, you have to either be part of the problem or part of the solution. There's no in-between way. And I realized that who I was and how I was behaving was very much a part of the problem.
How did that realization take place? Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
I remember. I had a hard time studying. I studied sciences, and I didn't, I studied biochemistry and biodynamics and all that, and so it was a difficult first year for me at the university. And there were 2 people. One was Noor Masalha, who is now in Britain as a professor of Middle Eastern Studies, but we were all undergraduates. And a young man from the village of Jish, I used to swim at the time, and during this time there were also two other people who were now members of Knesset. We were in the university at the same time. Is Neve and Israel Katz. For anyone here who is in our politics, these are very right-wing people.
Okay.
But they were students, and we were all students. And at the time, there was the beginnings of dialogue groups at the university. And I was always swamped with my work, and I had a lot of homework to do, and I couldn't take time off to go to anything. And I also thought it was a little bit complicated for me, and I kept postponing. But they were persistent, Noor and Hannah. And when I was going swimming at the end, they usually said, "Why don't you come to the group? And you have a lot to learn, and we have." And they were persistent.
Yeah.
And the more that I came to the group, the more friendly we got, and the more I discovered a world that I had not been raised to know. And I began to realize what it was to begin to have friendships, which is different from partnership.
Oh, okay.
Because a friendship is something that doesn't really test your solidarity.
Oh.
You don't really have to put your neck on the line and say, I'm willing to go forward and build the reality together. We were just friends. But during the time that these friendships ensued, Israel Katz and Tzachi Negbi were sort of swaggering types on the university. And my friend and I one day had someone painted on our door, you love Arabs and you're traitors to the state and whatever. And this was something very public, and it was also very shocking. First of all, being observed and watched, it was not something that I was used to. And the other thing was that someone would be so violent and began to be more scary on the campus. And I realized that you either have to be part of the problem or part of the solution. And at the time, Neve Shalom was beginning to be established. And people were going for weekends, and I, of course, had so much work to do. I couldn't go for weekends because I had to do my work and we only have a 1.5 day weekend. And one weekend, my friend said, just come over for the weekend to Wahat al Salaam. And there was nothing really there. There were 3 little wooden shacks and all sorts of spiritual people who were there doing ecumenical studies. And I was not very interested in religion at the time. Maybe I'm a little bit more spiritual now as I get older. And we began to come for weekends. And we began to delve really into the first dialogue groups that really existed in the country. And I didn't realize I was in a facilitation course. I didn't realize that after these weekends I was going to be expected to start leading workshops. And I sort of got swept away with it. And little by little it became my life.
What do you think, in addition to the persistence these two people offered you, and your mom's wisdom around, either part of the solution or part of the problem, what else do you think helped you be receptive to this? Any other experiences you could tell us about that you think might have helped shape your willingness, your openness?
Well, I was not so receptive to it. But I grew up in Mexico. And in Mexico, we were part of the Jewish movement. And I was part of the youth movement. And my father and mother were not Mexican, but I was very involved in this movement. And in the figures that we really sort of admired and idolized was Che Guevara and Fidel Castro, and I was brought up by friends to be socialist. And in 1967, when the war, when the occupation began, there was a huge rift. I think I was 9. I was born in 1958, so I was 9 years old. But I remember the conversations in the movement about how you couldn't continue to be socialist and Zionist at the same time. Didn't work. And on the kibbutz movement, there was always a newspaper that said socialism, Zionism, and the love of all peoples. And they were saying it doesn't work together. How can the kibbutz movement be talking about these as living compatibly? And so there were many people who left the movement. There were Jews who left the movement, and they went to join in South Mexico, in Chiapas, and in Guatemala. They went to join with the insurgents, and they were active in trying to bring about freedom for the oppressed people in the South. And I was 9 years old, and my family was not socialist or radical. They were liberal, good people, nice, but they were not the kind who would, go out and risk themselves in this kind of demonstrations, and I was 9. So I continued to be in the movement how it was, and continued in the mainstream, but there was something in the back of my mind that said things cannot continue being just the way they seem. And I felt it was time, if these people were being friends and persistent, that I discover a whole new Israel that I didn't know before, Palestine.
So you carried forward this thing in the back of your head from 9 years old till 25 that helped make it possible for you to engage in these experiences with these people?
Well, there were a few stops on the way. Imagine. In Arizona, when I came to live with my father, there were many Arab students. And they come to study Arab land studies in Arizona. And during this time, my father had made friendships also with many Arabs who were in his department of Arab land studies. He was studying about jojoba, learning how to raise jojoba bean. But we had never talked politics. And I had always had an interest, but I had been raised to think that, whenever they talk about Jaffa, having been Orange Grove, this was propaganda. I think I was raised like many Jewish kids to think that whatever other people said, especially Palestinians, was propaganda. And the more I talked to people, and the more I listened to people, and the more I engaged in deeper conversations, the more I realized that we were intertwined and enmeshed, that our futures were inextricably bonded, and that I really needed to grow. I couldn't just be involved with my people anymore. Even now I feel uncomfortable to be interviewed, and that Najwan is not here next to me being interviewed at the same time. It's something that with time began to be so part of my life that it just didn't seem natural to stand on my own anymore. One of the things I learned about partnership, you can't force another person into your own preference. It took me years to learn, but it never becomes simple. I think there's never a point for any, it can't be simple for me, because I came to Israel on the law of return. And I know that the law of return applies for Jews, and it gives me privilege. And Palestinians who live in the area and who were exposed cannot return, and sometimes even families cannot be reunited. And one cannot see this just as a Palestinian issue or a Palestinian problem, or a problem that does not relate to me. It's part of my life, and it's part of my responsibility. And I see this as something really important in my life. I can be concerned with Jewish destiny. And of course I'm part of the Jewish people. And of course I care. But I can't care anymore without taking responsibility to make sure that my counterparts, my partners, my friends, my colleagues, and people I don't know receive their nationhood as well. So my nationhood cannot really be complete. I can't really be happy.
So I wonder how this conversation's going for you.
It's okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
What kind of okay? Is it evoking any kind of thoughts, or taking you any places in your thinking that are important to you, or that you might not be thinking about if we weren't having this conversation?
Most of the time I don't need to think about it. I've made a statement, and I live my life, and it's never a thought to me. I know that there's people, for example, people ask me, are you still living in Neve Shalom? And I say, do I ask you, are you still living in Tel Aviv? Why do you expect me not to be living there anymore? And enveloped in this question is, you're supposed to grow out of it, or you're supposed to move on, or it's something. So I think to myself, maybe living there is a statement, and it's a commitment, and it's become a clear part of my life, and I'm a symbol for many people of the possibility. But maybe I'm not going a step further. Maybe being in touch with Artsbridge forces me to think, okay, so what's my next step? What would be my next step? And I think I need to take a next step. You can live in community and participate and continue growing. But when Evan said that you would be interviewing me about activism, I said to him, I'm not really activist right now. The work I'm doing is not activism. It's normal part of my life now.
I wish he told me that's what I was interviewing.
Okay.
That's the first I've heard of it.
Of activism. Okay. I do expect myself to to be much more of an activist. And a year and a half ago, it was Uri Avneri's birthday. Uri Avneri is an activist for Palestine and Israel, and he's 80, he's like 80 something, and he was running on one of the hills in the West Bank in Gaza, and West Bank hill, and I said to my daughter, I had kids when I was 35. I mean, I had a life before I had kids, and I said, when am I going to go back and start doing the real work of fighting against the occupation and doing something significant? And she said, so what's stopping you? And I said, no, I have kids. I can't just go up and start. She said, well, people in the West Bank, I mean, they have kids and they're doing whatever. Don't blame us if you're not being activists. But I feel that I can't just leave like that the way I used to. And I know that people who I met once during the first Intifada, there was a man called the Muharram Baruti from West Bank. He used to come to visit us a lot. And I said, don't you ever get tired, of the struggle? And he said, I don't have the luxury of asking myself, do I ever get tired? This is my life, and if I don't keep going at it, there will never be freedom for my people. And so I knew that I had the luxury to be tired or to have more privacy or to come and go from it. And it's not such a comfortable feeling.
What's not such a comfortable feeling?
Because it shouldn't be. When you're partners, then you need to keep pushing yourself to that one step further. I was thinking the other day, I think people who have built trust the way we have in our community and with other people, we should be active in doing negotiations with Hamas. I think it's very important, and I think very few people would dare to do it. And there was one Israeli woman who fell in love with Mohammed's bid and went over to the other side, and so she's considered a traitor. But I don't mean to go over to the other side. I mean to build a partnership where I'm still connected to my people and doing something that can push things in a better situation, because things are very stuck in the last few years. There was a time during the year 2000, 2002, where it really seemed that there was beginning to be a lot of prosperity, and there was beginning to be a lot of business going on. I'm not much of a business person, but I know that that's important between countries. And my brother, who's in the arms industry and all that, I don't know what he does, but I know that it's not very peaceful. I began to see that their business was beginning to think of how to move more into the civil industry, and that was very exciting to me. And I was saying, you see, this is possible. But it seems that Israel is addicted to war. We're somehow speaking about peace all the time and always mourning the dead, but there's an addiction there. So maybe Obama will help us move forward in a way where we can transcend, because something has to happen that takes us a step further.
It sounds like you've continued to hold on to these, would you say, statements or ways of being, these that have you thinking about what's most important, and now you're thinking about what next steps might fit with that for you. But I'm wondering what I would imagine lots of invitations to give up or despair or things like that, what helps you stay so strongly connected to what's important to you?
I don't even entertain the idea of despair, and I think that conversation with Muharram had an impact on me. And I think partly just growing up and realizing that this is a way of life. I don't keep thinking, do something else. Or I remember the day I went up to the bulletin board in our community. I remember when it was, no matter what I did, no matter what anyone did, somebody's feet were being stepped on. And no matter what you did, there was something wrong. And I thought, how can you live this way? But I remember the day that I went up to the bulletin board, and it wasn't the question of what had been done wrong, but I realized that this was the work, to come and to realize, okay, who has been excluded, and how are we going to include him back, or whose voice has not been heard, and how are we going to make it? I realized that's it. That's what we're here for. And so it's not so tiring anymore.
Yeah. And can you tell us a story about that would fit with that idea of the work, that doing the work, just so that we can have a richer understanding?
I'll tell you what's hard in our community. A lot of things are hard. But the three of us got together to establish a youth club. You know, we worked with youth from all over the world, and a friend of mine realized, Diana Shalom, realized that we have 87 young people in our community, and nobody's doing anything with them. They just go to school and they come back, and we expect them by osmosis somehow to be managing their partnership. It was something that, and she said, let's do something. I said, but my kids at that age, how can I facilitate kids who are the age of my kids? And she said, well, no, we don't have to facilitate, but let's establish that. And I said, no, it's talking to the parents, and everything you do is not going to be so right, and this parent, and Wahat al Salaam, everyone has their own opinion, and everybody is sure that they're right, and it's tough to build something that everyone will agree on. And she said, so it doesn't matter, so they won't agree on it. We should do it because our kids need it. My kids are grown, she said, and they never had a framework where they could really talk about what it's like to live in this community, what it's like to go to school outside and come back and to be weirdos, what it's like when the Jewish kids decide that they're going to go to the army and the Palestinian kids don't, and that someone has to help them talk about it, because she was saying that what happens is that when they grow up to be 16 or 17, we just abandon them and they have to cope on their own. So I thought, okay, this is something I should do. And then another friend of mine, Maysoon Karaman, also joined, so that when we were three mothers who put this together, and a dad. The dad didn't last. He's Palestinian and one Jewish. And this has been really the most significant volunteer work I've done in the community for the last 7 years. I swore, by the way, that I don't want to be paid in the community. I don't want to work in the community. I want to work elsewhere and be involved in the community without any strings attached. Because if you think about something that's really hard, is to be working and living in the same community. That's harder than Palestinian-Jewish relations. Much harder. It's too complicated. And so I wanted my freedom to do what I wanted and to be with these friends. And the youth began to come, and it began to be not so easy among us. And although, everything takes place in Arabic because I can understand Arabic, and there's no reason why my two friends should be studying in Hebrew for me. And so it was the challenge to begin to build a team. And we said the very first week, we said, okay, we know this is hard. We know that there will be difficult times with parents in the community. We know that when we start working with the girls separate and the boys separate, we start doing, because we're all group workers, we all know what group is about, there will be conflict in the community. And we have to promise ourselves that we don't pick up and go. Stay in the relationship and stay with it, because as soon, and we knew that from the work that we did before, that as soon as we make that commitment, then we can go wherever we want to go. But when there's the thought that if something happens, if we have a conflict, then you pick up and go. Or I pick up and go, there's not the safety to really build a relationship and to really build the work. So we put our hands together, so okay, no matter what happens, we're staying. And that went on for 6 years.
Thank you for that story. It's very interesting to learn about the work in your local community.
There cannot be a limit to what you talk about, and there cannot be a limit to who you talk to if you want things to work over time. I think.
Cause an idea, whose time has come, cannot be stopped by anyone. Plant your seeds in fertile ground. There ain't nothing gonna keep it down. Oh, we can do it.